Hollywood has been on quite a tear lately, running popular franchises into the ground to the point that the audience loses interest and just stops showing up. The Terminator, Alien, not to mention Star Wars and Star Trek, have all seen the big screen incarnations grind to a halt due to lackluster sequels that left audiences disinterested, if not repelled, by the most recent installments. So when a new sequel to The Matrix was announced, I met it with the same response I have to just about everything Hollywood is putting out these days. Oh God, how bad is this going to be? How woke will it be? Will it trash everything in the previous films in order to establish some new status quo or subvert expectations? The trailers didn't do anything to make me feel better. They showed what appeared to be a rehash of the first Matrix film, with some new characters handling most of the action and Neo just sort of walking passively through the story. It didn't help that Lana Wachowski made statements in the press about how the film was intended to reclaim terms like red pill and blue pill from the political right, as she termed it. So I went into Matrix Resurrections with more than a little bit of trepidation. What I saw was a movie that wasn't as bad as I was expecting, but it's still a pretty lackluster film. Yet another example of a franchise installment that didn't need to be made, like Terminator Dark Fate or Prometheus, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I'll do a spoiler-free review of the film before getting into spoilers later in this video. So, without getting into details, The Matrix Resurrections attempts to reboot the franchise in much the same way that Terminator Dark Fate did, by basically retelling the original story, minimizing the central male character, and moving female characters into a more essential role. The basic plot largely goes through the same basic beats as the original Matrix film with a bit of a twist. The characters know about the events of the original trilogy, and the film, through the characters, makes numerous comments about the original films, their cultural impact, their meaning, and the Hollywood assembly line that wants to churn out new sequels regardless of the original filmmaker's intention. This was the part of the film that I found interesting. The meta commentary about the original Matrix, how films are received by the audience, and how Hollywood is determined to squeeze as much as possible out of every franchise to the point that they ruin it and leave the audience disaffected. The result is a film that serves only to reinvent a popular franchise so that it falls more in line with current day Hollywood views. So yes, the film is woke, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be, for whatever that's worth. Like other recent franchise failures, this is a movie that will likely alienate many longtime fans and caters to an audience that is either non-existent or so small that it almost guarantees the film will fail outright, or at least deeply divide the fandom. There's plenty of action, but again, this kind of hyperkinetic martial arts action combined with CGI effects and wire work was revolutionary for Hollywood 20 years ago, but we've seen this stuff many times since then, and the bar for fight choreography was set very high by the first Matrix film. The action in Resurrections just isn't as impressive, even with the improved effects to support them. Okay, now I'm going to get into spoilers going forward, so if you don't want to hear them, you should drop out and come back after seeing the film. So, The Matrix Resurrections takes place about 60 years after the original trilogy. Neo, or Thomas Anderson, is a game programmer. 20 years earlier, he created a popular virtual reality video game called The Matrix, but he eventually began to have difficulty distinguishing between reality and the game, and came to believe that he was really Neo and the characters in the game, such as Trinity, were also real. He eventually went into therapy and still sees his psychotherapist, or analyst, regularly. His analyst supplies him with meds to deal with the recurrence of his delusions in the form of blue pills. Thomas is told by his business partner, named Smith, that the company wants to do another installment of The Matrix, which Thomas swore he would never do after his mental illness. This was the part of the movie that I found most interesting. Thomas is reluctant to do another Matrix, but is told that the company plans to move forward with a sequel whether he participates or not. It's easy to see that this is the situation the Wachowskis found themselves in. Warner Brothers was going to do another Matrix film, with or without them, and Lana Wachowski tried to make the best of it so that she could at least exert control over what happened to her characters. There's a scene where Thomas and some of his co-workers are brainstorming ideas for the new sequel, and they have differing views about what the Matrix is really about and what makes it popular with people. Some point to the philosophical aspects of the original film. Others say it's the gunfights and the action. Others say it's all about bullet time. After this, the movie becomes largely a note-for-note remake of the first film. The authorities come to Neo's office. He gets messages from Morpheus telling him how to avoid the cops again. He meets Morpheus again. Morpheus offers him the red pill or blue pill again. Neo chooses the red pill again. He wakes up in his pod again. He's taken aboard a hover ship and meets the crew again. He fights Morpheus in a dojo again, etc., etc. The difference is that instead of saving Morpheus, the final act involves freeing Trinity from the Matrix. Now, you might be thinking Neo and Trinity died in Matrix Revolution, so how are they still alive? We learn all of this from Neo's analyst, who it turns out is actually the new version of the architect. The analyst created this new version of the Matrix. After the death of Neo and Trinity in the original films, the machines discovered that the Matrix began to break down without them. Somehow, Trinity and Neo are necessary for the Matrix to function properly, or something like that. They're a dyad, or whatever that thing was that Kylo and Rey had in Star Wars. Anyway, the machines brought Neo and Trinity back to life, somehow, and plugged them into this new version of the Matrix so that everything will run smoothly. And it isn't just Neo and Trinity. The Smith guy that works with Neo is, surprise, surprise, Agent Smith, who wants to kill Neo or help Neo or something. I don't know. His agenda seems to change with every scene that he's in. Anyway, they awaken Trinity to who she really is, and it turns out that Neo isn't really the one. Neo and Trinity together are the one, which is kind of puzzling since the whole point of a chosen one is that he or she is a chosen one, not a chosen two. Neo and Trinity confront the analyst and tell him that they're going to remake the Matrix again and he can't stop them, and the movie ends with them flying off into the sky together. Because, yeah, Trinity can fly now too, because she's the one too, or 1-1 or something. I don't know. You know what I mean. The whole thing plays as a mediocre remake of the first film. Everything except the effects seems just a bit less impressive. What made the original Matrix so compelling was its central mystery. What is the Matrix? The Hong Kong-inspired action sequences, the revolutionary CGI effects, and the great fight choreography. But we already know what the Matrix is, so watching Neo awaken to the truth holds no drama. We're just sort of marking time until he gets to the revelation we already know is coming, and that we already have the answer to. The action is also largely unimpressive. It's not that it's bad, but they clearly aren't putting in the effort they did in the original films. Remember how Keanu and the other cast members spent months training and rehearsing the fight sequences for the original films? Yeah, they didn't do that here, clearly. And the simple fact is that Keanu isn't 30 anymore. He's 50, and a 50-year-old just doesn't move like a 30-year-old. Believe me, I know. The cast is also just not as good as the original films. Yes, Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss are back, but the rest of the cast is mostly new actors, and they just aren't as good. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, you may remember him as Black Manta in Aquaman, replaces Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, and while he's okay, he doesn't bring anything new to the character. Jennifer Henwick, who played Colleen Wing on Iron Fist, plays Bugs, a ship captain who helps Morpheus awaken Neo and free him from the Matrix. She's that blue-haired character in the trailers, and I thought the movie was probably going to revolve around her going into it, but that's really not the case. In fact, after the first half or so, she's largely irrelevant. If you've seen the trailers, you've seen most of the stuff she does in the movie already. One of the big problems is that the movie lacks a good antagonist. The original films had Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. He was creepy, and with his size, penetrating gaze, and odd vocal delivery, he made a fascinating opponent for Neo. This new film replaces Hugo Weaving with Jonathan Groth as Smith this time, and the difference is pretty glaring. Groth lacks the size to be an intimidating physical presence, and the script doesn't give him much to work with, relying on the viewer's memories of the original films to fill in the blanks on Smith's character. It doesn't help that Smith's intentions are never really very clear. When he first awakens, he seems intent on killing Neo again, but then he shows up at the end to help Neo escape from the machines for some reason. The real villain this time around is the analyst, played by Doogie Howser. He's the successor to the architect, and again, he just isn't very credible as a threat. If he was an animal, he'd be a labradoodle or a cockapoo. This film can be safely skipped. There's just not much here to recommend. It's not worth the price of a ticket. Anyway, let me know what you thought of The Matrix in the comments, and please like this video before you leave. Also, please sub to the channel and hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.